The door opened 3 seconds after I rang the bell. The woman standing there had damp hair and bare feet. She was wearing an oversized men's t-shirt that fell almost to her knees. I recognized it before I recognized her. Faded black cotton. Cracked white lettering. The logo of an old alternative rock band across the chest. It was Evan's favorite college shirt. 2 years into our marriage, I had once held it up while cleaning out a closet and asked if I could donate it. Evan had reacted as if I'd suggested throwing away his diploma. No, that stays. He had laughed afterward, but he had still taken the shirt out of my hands and folded it himself. That thing survived college with me. It's practically family. His mother, Diane, eventually took a box of his old things to store at her place. Apparently, the shirt had made its way back. Just not to my husband. The woman at the door blinked when she saw me. For half a second, surprise flashed across her face. Then she recovered and gave me a polite smile. Hi, can I help you? I didn't answer right away. I looked past her shoulder. The beach house didn't look the way it had 6 months earlier when I handed Diane and Frank the keys. A pale women's cardigan was draped over the back of the sofa. 2 half-finished glasses of red wine sat on the coffee table next to takeout containers. A pair of pink slippers rested beside a pair of gray sneakers I knew very well. Evan's sneakers. Next to them was something smaller that bothered me even more. Evan's black travel charger, the one with a strip of blue tape wrapped around the cord. He carried it on every overnight trip because he was always losing hotel chargers. I had packed it for him myself before the supposed Atlanta conference. That meant he had not simply stopped by his parents' house on the way home. He had brought overnight things. He had expected to sleep there. On the console by the stairs sat his leather toiletry bag, half unzipped. I could see the silver cap of his cologne inside. The details were so ordinary that they were worse than anything dramatic. Nothing in that room looked rushed. No one had been caught in the middle of a one-time mistake. The house looked lived in. He had told me he was in Atlanta for a 3-day sales conference. I had bought the beach house 6 months earlier for Evan's parents to retire in. The deed was in my name, and I had paid for it myself. I had given Diane and Frank the largest bedroom because it had the best view. Now a hairdryer was running somewhere down that hallway. The woman at the door shifted her weight. Are you looking for someone? She asked again. Evan. Her smile paused. Oh, Evan went out to pick up seafood. Then she added too quickly, I mean, Mr. Parker. I looked down at the gray sneakers. For some reason, I felt very calm. Not peaceful. Not numb exactly. Just calm in the way you get when the final piece of a puzzle falls into place, and suddenly every strange little detail from the past 6 months has an explanation. Before I could say anything, Diane appeared in the hallway. She stopped when she saw me. Her first reaction wasn't happiness. It was irritation. Claire? What are you doing here? You should have called. I had been in Wilmington for a book event. I had finished earlier than expected and decided to surprise my in-laws with lunch. That had been my mistake. Surprises only work when everyone has been telling the truth. I nodded toward the woman. Who is she? Diane moved faster than I would have expected. She stepped between us, as if she could physically block the answer. This is Sophie. A friend of the family. She's between apartments and looking for work down here, so I told her she could stay a few days. That's all. Sophie. I knew the name. Sophie Monroe. Evan's first serious girlfriend. They had dated through most of college and broken up after graduation. According to Evan, it had ended because Sophie wanted to move to New York and he didn't. He had described it as one of those relationships that belong to another lifetime. I had never been threatened by it. People had pasts. At least, I had thought they were supposed to stay in the past. I looked at the shirt again. She doesn't have clothes of her own? Diane's expression hardened. She took a shower. It's an old shirt. Don't start making something out of nothing. Where's Evan? I told you. He went out. His shoes are right there. Diane's eyes dropped to the floor. That was when the bedroom door opened. Evan walked out wearing lounge pants and a gray sweatshirt. His hair was flattened on one side, the way it got after a nap. He saw me and froze. Then his face tightened. How did you know I was here? It was such a revealing first question that I almost laughed. Not, what are you doing here? Not, I can explain. How did you know? You said you were in Atlanta. He rubbed a hand over his face. The conference ended early. I came down to see my parents. Sophie happened to be here. That's it. She happened to be here wearing your shirt? It's a shirt, Claire. And sleeping in the main bedroom? His jaw flexed. The house has 4 bedrooms. Why does it matter which one she uses? Are you staying here too? He exhaled loudly. I've had a brutal month at work. Can you not interrogate me the second you walk in? Diane jumped in immediately. Exactly. Evan works hard. He doesn't need to come home to more pressure from you. You make everything about money and schedules and plans. You don't understand how exhausting that can be for a man. I looked at her. Then I looked at Sophie. Sophie hadn't said a word. Her eyes were lowered. Her fingers pinched the hem of Evan's old shirt. Evan glanced at her and softened in a way he hadn't softened toward me in months. Sophie, don't worry about this. None of this is your fault. That was the moment the last excuse died. I took out my phone. I photographed the entryway, the wine glasses, the women's things in the living room, the shoes. Diane stepped toward me. What are you doing? This is a family home. No, I said. It's my house. She stared at me. I looked at Evan. I want everyone who doesn't live here legally out. Today. For the first time, he looked genuinely confused. What? I'm selling the house. Diane's voice shot up. You can't sell this house. You bought this for us. I bought it for you to retire in. I didn't buy it so your son could use it as a private hotel with his ex-girlfriend. Don't be disgusting, she snapped. You're seeing what you want to see. Then this should be easy. Everyone leaves. Diane planted her hands on her hips. You married into this family. You don't get to act like everything is yours just because your name is on a piece of paper. I stared at her. So you do understand whose name is on the piece of paper. Her mouth closed. Evan stepped closer. Enough. Sophie can leave if that's what this is about. You don't need to threaten my parents or sell a house because you're jealous. I'm not threatening anyone. Then what do you want? I looked at him for a long time. For 3 years, every serious argument between us had ended the same way. I would give in first. Not because I thought he was right, but because I believed marriage wasn't supposed to be about winning. If I could absorb one more inconvenience, cover one more bill, smooth over one more conflict, I thought that meant I was protecting our relationship. Eventually, Evan stopped seeing compromise as something I chose. He started seeing it as something I owed him. I said, keep her. He blinked. What? You don't need to send Sophie away to prove anything to me. Keep her. I'm selling the house. I turned and walked out. He followed me onto the porch and grabbed my wrist. Claire, if you walk away like this, don't come back crying when you calm down. I looked at his hand. He released me. Don't worry, I said. I won't. I got into my car. I didn't cry. Not yet. The house sat on the North Carolina coast, a little over 200 miles from our home in Charlotte. I had bought it because Evan had spent years talking about how much his parents wanted to retire near the ocean. Frank had gone through a difficult cardiac procedure the year before, and I had believed I was helping people I considered family. I could afford to. I was a commercial novelist with a backlist that generated royalties and licensing income. The down payment and closing funds had come from an investment account I opened years before I met Evan, along with proceeds from rights I had owned before the marriage. I had kept the purchase records because writers learn to keep records of everything. At the time, none of that had felt defensive. It had felt like paperwork. The first call I made was to the issuer of the premium credit card account Evan had been using as an authorized user. I need every authorized user card on my account disabled immediately. The representative verified my identity twice. The second call was to Jenna Morales, the realtor who had helped me buy the beach house. I want the property listed. Start with an updated valuation and let me know the fastest clean path to market. The third call was to Rachel Kim, a family law attorney my accountant had recommended when Evan and I first started combining finances. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Are you asking me what your options are, or are you telling me you've decided? I looked up at the second-floor windows of the beach house. A white curtain moved in the ocean wind. For a second, I saw Sophie's silhouette behind it. I've decided. Rachel's voice changed immediately. Then stop arguing with him. Save everything. Don't delete messages. Keep communication in writing when you can. Send me the purchase records for the beach house, your pre-marriage account statements, and 3 years of major transfers. We'll sort fact from emotion first. Okay. When I ended the call, I realized my hand was shaking so badly I had to set the phone in the cup holder. That night, Evan called 17 times. I didn't answer. At 9:30, an unfamiliar number appeared. I answered because I knew it was him. He didn't say hello. You shut off my card? I stood by the window of the Charlotte condo I had bought years before our marriage, the same place where I still kept my home office. Yes. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Where were you? Silence. Then I heard mall music in the background. And Sophie's voice, low and embarrassed. Forget it, Evan. I don't need it. I closed my eyes. You were buying her something. His anger sharpened. That's none of your business. You gave me that card 3 years ago. You don't get to just turn it off without warning. It's my account. You were an authorized user. I removed you. Turn it back on. No. Claire, stop being insane. Sophie stayed with my parents for a few days. You're blowing up our marriage over nothing. You're selling a house, shutting down cards, calling lawyers. What do you call that if not crazy? I suddenly felt tired all the way through my bones. He still thought this was a tactic. He believed I was trying to scare him into sending Sophie away. Evan, I said, keep her. What are you talking about? Keep her. I'm selling the house. I hung up. The next morning, Jenna took the first prospective buyers to the property. Diane blocked the front door. Evan told the buyers I had no right to sell because the house was marital property and said they would be walking into a lawsuit. Jenna sent me a short video from the driveway. Old Claire would have driven down there immediately and tried to reason with everyone. New Claire forwarded the video to Rachel. Rachel called me after reviewing the deed, closing documents, bank records, and the source of the purchase funds. Your tracing is strong, she said. That doesn't mean I want you making legal speeches to them. It means we handle this properly. I'll send formal notice regarding possession and preserve your position on the property. Jenna can continue with the listing. Do not get into a shouting match on the front lawn. I won't. That evening, Evan found another number and texted me. We can talk. Then, if you stop the sale, I'll have Sophie move out. I read the message 3 times. Not, I'll end it. Not, I lied to you. Not, I'm sorry. I'll have Sophie move out. As if removing a woman who should never have been living there was a concession he could trade for $1 million house. I replied with one line. The house is still being sold. Then I muted the number. For the next 2 days, I did what I should have done long before things got this far. I looked at the money. I started with the ordinary charges, because ordinary charges tell you how people actually live. There were Friday grocery deliveries to the beach house when Diane had told me she and Frank were away. There were gas charges along the Charlotte to Wilmington route on weekends. Evan claimed he was golfing with clients, and restaurant bills near the riverfront on nights. He said he was working late. One grocery account had been switched so often to the beach house address that the app had saved it as a favorite location. The first delivery was almost 4 months old. I clicked through the itemized receipts. Steaks, sparkling water, expensive coffee, a bottle of gin Evan liked, Greek yogurt he ate every morning, a brand of oat milk I had never bought because I hated it. It was such a small thing, that oat milk. But I remembered opening our refrigerator in Charlotte one Saturday and wondering why Evan had barely touched the groceries I had bought. He had told me he was trying intermittent fasting. Apparently he had just been eating breakfast somewhere else. I opened my calendar and matched charges to the explanations I remembered. A Saturday client golf outing lined up with a seafood restaurant in Wilmington. A Thursday late meeting lined up with a hotel. A weekend he said Frank was sick lined up with dinner and a wine shop near the coast. The picture did not arrive all at once. It assembled itself transaction by transaction. That was what made it impossible to dismiss. Writers are strange about records. At least I am. For years, every book, every royalty statement, every foreign rights payment, every licensing check, every tax estimate, and every investment transfer had been labeled and archived. It wasn't because I distrusted Evan. It was because publishing income could be irregular and organization kept me sane. That habit became a shield I had never expected to need. I pulled the beach house closing records. Furniture. Insurance. Improvements. Taxes. Then I downloaded 3 years of card statements from the account Evan had used. At first, I was only trying to separate ordinary household spending from purchases that might matter in a divorce. Then I found a charge from 6 months earlier. A high-end jewelry store in Atlanta. $6,400. I remembered that month clearly. It had been our anniversary. Evan brought home supermarket flowers, a bottle of wine, and a box of chocolates. He apologized for not doing more because, according to him, a commission payment at work had been delayed. I had kissed him and said I didn't care. I really hadn't cared. I could still see that anniversary night clearly. Evan came home almost an hour late carrying a grocery store bouquet wrapped in clear plastic. The roses were already opening too far at the edges. He put a bottle of red wine on the counter and kissed my cheek. "I'm sorry this is low-key," he said. "That commission I told you about still hasn't cleared." I didn't want to put anything stupid on a card. I had been finishing edits all afternoon, and I remember feeling guilty that he looked embarrassed. "You don't need to buy me anything," I told him. "Seriously. We can order Thai food and call it a night." He smiled like I had rescued him from something. We ate takeout on the sofa. I gave him a watch strap he had mentioned wanting. He gave me the supermarket flowers and chocolates. When he apologized again, I actually told him that money was the least interesting thing about our marriage. At the time, I believed that sentence. Now, looking at the statement, I realized the $6,400 jewelry charge had posted at 2:17 that same afternoon. Hours before he came home and told me money was tight. He had not been unable to afford a meaningful anniversary gift for his wife. He had been using his wife's credit account to buy a meaningful gift for someone else. That distinction hurt more than the price. The card statement linked to an electronic receipt. I opened it. The purchaser was Evan Parker. The delivery contact was Sophie Monroe. I kept scrolling. Boutique hotel. Airfare. Restaurants for two. Women's perfume. A home goods store near the beach house. Then I found a hotel confirmation that had been forwarded to the email tied to the card account. 1 room. 2 registered guests, Evan Parker and Sophie Monroe. The date was a Thursday night. Evan had told me he was entertaining clients in Raleigh. I saved the receipt as a PDF and forwarded it to Rachel. There was no longer anything to argue about. Whatever label Evan wanted to use, this had not been a misunderstanding at the beach house. The dates went back months, and some of the home purchases began after I gave Diane and Frank the keys. I exported everything and sent the files to Rachel. She called 30 minutes later. "Preserve the original statements. And think carefully. Has Evan ever asked you to sign anything related to refinancing, adding an owner, securing a line of credit against the beach property, anything like that?" I sat very still. 3 months earlier, Evan had brought home a folder from a bank. He said it was information about setting up a family line of credit so his parents would have emergency access to funds if something happened and I was traveling. I had been 40 pages into a deadline and barely looked at it. "I'll read it after I turn this book in," I had told him. He never brought it up again. I went to the filing cabinet in my studio and found the folder at the bottom. It was not a simple emergency credit proposal. Near the back was a consultation summary about changing title and adding a spouse as a co-owner as part of a future refinance. One printed note read, "Consider adding spouse to deed before restructuring." My hands went cold. And then I remembered a dinner at Diane's house 2 months before that folder appeared. We had been eating roast chicken when she said, almost casually, "Claire, since we're all treating the beach place as the family home now, wouldn't it be easier if Evan were on the deed too? God forbid something happened to you while you were traveling." I had laughed because the question seemed so oddly timed. My estate plan already covers emergencies, I said. And the attorney who handled the purchase told me not to change title casually. Diane smiled immediately. Oh, honey, I didn't mean anything by it. I just worry. That's what mothers do. The subject disappeared at the table. That night, though, Evan brought it up again while we were getting ready for bed. You made Mom feel stupid, he said. I answered her question. You turned a simple family conversation into a legal lecture. Because she asked me to change ownership of a house. He shook his head and pulled off his watch. This is what I mean, Claire. Everything with you becomes a transaction. A deed. A contract. A spreadsheet. Sometimes family is just family. I remember standing there with a hairbrush in my hand, wondering if he was right. The next morning I had texted Diane an apology for sounding defensive. Now the memory changed shape completely. She had not asked a harmless question that I had overanalyzed. She and Evan had already been discussing the title behind my back, and when I did not cooperate, they had made me feel guilty for noticing what they were doing. That night, I searched old messages. Months earlier, Evan had once sent me screenshots from a family group chat because he was annoyed that Diane kept asking him about paperwork while he was at work. At the time, I had only read the last message. Now I zoomed in. A few lines above it, Diane had written, It still isn't right that the beach place is only in Claire's name. You're married. Eventually your name needs to be on it too. Evan had replied, Relax. She doesn't think like that. She trusts me. Diane. Then don't make it a big issue. Let her get used to calling it the family house. Later you can say it's for refinancing or estate planning. I read the exchange 3 times. That was the moment the betrayal stopped being about Sophie. Sophie wasn't even the part that made me feel sick anymore. The deeper truth was that Evan and his mother had already decided that anything I earned would eventually become ours, and anything that became ours would eventually become theirs. My work, my savings, my property, my willingness to help. They had treated all of it like a resource that would keep renewing forever. I sent the screenshots to Rachel. Her reply came quickly. Not dispositive by itself, but relevant to intent. Save originals and metadata. Do not confront him about this yet. The first real pushback arrived the following morning. Rachel forwarded me a letter from Evan's attorney. It was calm, professional, and far more unsettling than any of Diane's voice messages. Evan was asserting an equitable interest in the beach house. The letter pointed out that the property had been acquired during the marriage and claimed marital money had contributed to insurance, taxes, furnishings, maintenance, and improvements. It also warned that he would object to any sale that ignored his claimed rights. For the first time since I left Wilmington, I felt something close to fear. I called Rachel immediately. I thought we traced the purchase money. We did. Then why can he claim this? Because good facts are not magic words, she said. The source of the purchase funds matters. So do any marital contributions after purchase. Title matters. Timing matters. The exact character of every contribution matters. We do not win by pretending he does not exist. We win by documenting what is actually his and what is actually yours. Could he get half? Nothing I've seen supports that conclusion. But I am not going to tell you there is zero risk, just to make you feel better. Strong is not the same as automatic. I hated that sentence. I also trusted her more for saying it. For the next 3 nights, my dining table disappeared under statements and closing files. Rachel's paralegal sent me a spreadsheet with categories: acquisition funds, taxes, insurance, repairs, improvements, furnishings, utilities, transfers from joint accounts, transfers from separate accounts. I traced every line I could. The original purchase funds came cleanly from the premarital investment account and rights income Rachel had already identified. Most property expenses had been paid from an account funded by those same sources. A few carrying costs had come from a joint checking account. 1 deck repair had been paid from marital income. There were legitimate contributions to account for. A week earlier, the uncertainty would have terrified me. Now I only wanted the numbers to be accurate. If there were legitimate marital contributions, we would account for them. What I would not do is turn those contributions into an imaginary half of a house just because Evan had spent 3 years treating my success as something he would eventually inherit. 5 days after I listed the beach house, Evan, Sophie, Diane, and Frank finally vacated it. Not because they suddenly respected my decision. Rachel's formal letters made it clear that turning the property into a family battleground would only make everything uglier and more expensive. Diane and Frank went to a short-term rental while they figured out what to do next. Evan did not tell me where he went, and I did not ask. Diane left me 26 voice messages the day they packed. I listened to less than a minute total. In the first message, she said I had destroyed the family. In the second, she said women who cared too much about independence always ended up alone. By the third, I stopped listening. When Jenna went in to prepare the property for photographs, she texted me pictures. 2 coffee mugs on the nightstand. A few dresses still hanging in the main bedroom closet. A toiletry bag in the bathroom. Do you want any of this boxed? Jenna asked. No. Have them collect whatever belongs to them. Anything left after the deadline can be removed according to the notice. I want the house empty. The property received an offer faster than I expected. I didn't slash the price to punish anyone. I accepted a clean, reasonable offer from buyers who wanted a quick closing. Then the title attorney slowed everything down. Rachel called me after speaking with the closing office. Your tracing case is strong, she said, but Evan is asserting a property claim, and the closing attorney wants a clean conveyance. We're not turning the closing table into a family law trial. So what happens? We give him a choice. He can sign the documents needed to let the sale close without giving up whatever equitable distribution argument his lawyer thinks he has. The net proceeds stay in my trust account until we allocate them by written agreement or court order. Or he can try to block a good sale and explain to a judge why preserving his leverage matters more than preserving the asset. Evan chose the first option after his own attorney explained that refusing to sign would not magically make half the houses. At closing, he signed the necessary papers in a different conference room. I never saw him. When Jenna and I stepped outside afterward, she looked back toward the water. You sure? This place is going to be worth more in a few years. There are other good houses. That's true. I don't want this one. The sale was done. The money was not mine to spend yet. It sat in Rachel's trust account while the lawyers sorted out the classification. That was fine with me. I wanted a clean ending more than a dramatic one. The next afternoon, Sophie came to see me. She was waiting outside the building where I rented office space for my writing business. She wore a simple white dress and almost no makeup. She looked less like the woman I had found in my husband's t-shirt and more like someone who wanted to be taken seriously. Claire, can I have 10 minutes? I almost kept walking. Then she said, I'm not staying at the beach house anymore. I stopped. We went to the coffee shop downstairs. Sophie wrapped both hands around her cup. I know you hate me. Up close, she looked more tired than I expected. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, and she kept checking her phone without unlocking it. Before you say anything, she added, I know what this looks like. Do you? She flinched. Then she said, the day the card stopped working, I asked Evan why he couldn't just use another one. He told me you handled the big accounts because you were better with money. I thought that meant the two of you had agreed on it. I waited. Then I asked him about the beach house. He said it was complicated. Complicated how? First he said you bought it together. Then he said technically it was in your name. Then he said that wouldn't matter in a divorce because you'd been married long enough. 3 years. Apparently that was now a financial theory. Sophie looked down at her coffee. I started asking questions. He didn't like that. I don't. She looked up. I don't care about you enough to hate you. Her face tightened. For a moment, I wondered if I had been unnecessarily cruel. Then she started talking. Evan told me your marriage had been over for a long time. He said you were basically business partners. That you cared about work more than anything else. He said the beach house was something you bought together, but it was in your name because your income was higher and it made financing easier. I said nothing. He said when you divorced, he'd get his share. There it was. She spoke more quickly after that. as if once one lie had been admitted the rest were easier. Evan had told her I had emotionally checked out of the marriage years earlier. According to him, I cared more about deadlines than people. I slept in my office half the time. I had no interest in building a family. I controlled the money because control was the only thing I enjoyed. He said you two had basically agreed to separate after your next book came out, Sophie said. He said the only reason it wasn't public was because of contracts and taxes. I almost laughed. The night before I found them at the beach house, Evan had texted me from his supposed Atlanta hotel asking if I wanted him to pick up coffee beans on the drive home. Apparently that was how separated we were. Did he tell you I knew about you? I asked. Sophie looked embarrassed. He said you knew there was someone else, but you didn't care as long as it stayed private. For 1 second, anger rose hot and immediate. Not because she believed him. Because I finally understood how convenient his story had been. To me, Sophie was an old girlfriend who happened to be near his parents. To Sophie, I was a cold wife who had privately released him. To his mother, I was the provider who could be managed until the assets were secure. Evan had not been maintaining one lie. He had built separate versions of reality for everyone around him. She continued carefully. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just think this has gotten really hostile. You sold the house. You removed him from the cards. Lawyers are involved. Maybe you don't have to leave him with nothing. What would count as not leaving him with nothing? I don't know. Something fair. She hesitated. Then asked, the beach house was partly his, right? I finally understood why she had come. She wasn't here to apologize. She was conducting due diligence. She wanted to know what Evan would still be worth after the divorce. No, I said. The beach house wasn't partly his. Her expression changed. What about the condo in Charlotte? I bought it before I met him. The one you both lived in? We didn't both own it. She stared into her coffee. The car, it's titled to him. I'm not fighting over it. He can keep it. He can also pay the insurance, registration, maintenance, parking, and everything else that comes with it. Sophie frowned. He said the car was paid for. I smiled slightly. It is. That's not what I said. She looked away. And the money from the beach house sale? It's being held until the property issues are resolved. She looked up quickly. That answer mattered to her. And the black card? Now it was my turn to study her. So he told you about that too. Her cheeks colored. I said, it was never his card. He was an authorized user on my account. Her fingers went still around the cup. I picked up my bag. She looked at me sharply. So what does he actually get? She asked it too quickly. The performance was over. I stood. That's a question for his lawyer. Then I paused. But I can tell you one thing. What? The lifestyle you fell in love with was never his. I left her at the table. Sophie had thought she chose a man with a beach house, a luxury car, and effortless money. She had simply never asked who was paying for the illusion. Walking back to my office, one sentence stayed with me. So what does he actually get? A week later, Evan asked for mediation. We met at Rachel's office. Rachel prepared me for it the day before. Do not go in there expecting an apology, she said. Mediation is not confession. People come in protecting positions. Sometimes they say ugly things because they think the ugly thing gives them leverage. Your job is not to correct every insult. Your job is to know what result you can live with. What do you think he'll argue? Based on his attorney's last letter? Financial control. He'll say you managed the accounts, removed his access without warning, controlled the housing, and used your higher income to create dependence. I stared at her. He had his own checking account. I know. His own salary. His own retirement. His own cards. I know. He chose to spend most of his paycheck on himself. Rachel gave me a small smile. Good. Save that clarity for the room. When I arrived, Evan was already seated across from his attorney. He looked different. He had always cared about appearances. Even on Saturdays, he cleaned his shoes before leaving the house. His shirts were pressed. His hair was styled. He loved good watches, new sneakers, and the small details that made him feel successful. That day, his shirt was wrinkled. There were dark circles under his eyes. The corner of his phone screen was cracked. He watched me sit down. "You lost weight," he said. I opened my folder. "Let's talk about the divorce." His lawyer gave the standard opening about resolving matters respectfully and avoiding unnecessary escalation. Rachel didn't argue. Evan's attorney went first. He did not accuse me of adultery or cruelty. He did something smarter. He described a marriage with a severe financial imbalance. Claire earned substantially more. Claire controlled the primary residence. Claire controlled the premium credit account. Claire purchased the beach property in her sole name. Claire terminated Evan's access to the card without notice and immediately moved to sell property his parents occupied. The words were technically arranged around facts. The story they created was almost unrecognizable. Evan finally spoke. "I never knew what we really had," he said. "Everything was always under Claire's control. If she was happy, everything was fine. The second she got angry, she could turn off my card and sell the roof over my parents' heads. How is that not financial abuse?" The phrase landed in the room and sat there. For 3 years I had paid our mortgage, most utilities, vacations, major home expenses, much of his parents' medical support, and nearly every large emergency. I had given him access to an account with a limit higher than his annual salary. And now the withdrawal of that access was being presented as abuse. My instinct was to defend myself immediately. Rachel put one finger lightly on the edge of my folder. "Wait." She asked Evan a series of questions. "Did you have employment throughout the marriage?" "Yes." "Was your paycheck deposited into an account in your name?" "Yes." "Did Claire have the ability to remove money from that account without your permission?" "No." "Did you maintain personal credit cards?" "Yes." "A retirement account through your employer?" "Yes." "Were you ever prevented from buying food, obtaining medical care, or accessing your own wages?" Evan's jaw tightened. "That's not the point." "Then let's identify the point. The account Claire terminated was her premium card account, on which you were an authorized user. Correct?" His attorney answered before he could. "Correct, with the reservation that the spending pattern may still be relevant to the marital standard of living." "Of course," Rachel said. "And the records will show exactly what that standard of living cost and who paid for it." That was the first moment Evan stopped looking certain. She simply placed the documents on the table, one set at a time. The source of funds for the beach house. The deed. The pre-marriage brokerage statements. The card records. The timeline of Evan's spending with Sophie. The title change consultation papers. The family messages. Our joint account history. My publishing contracts and records distinguishing older catalog rights from income earned during the marriage. Then came the records that had nothing to do with the technical classification of property and everything to do with credibility. Rachel placed the $6,400 jewelry receipt beside the anniversary date on our calendar. She placed the hotel confirmation beside Evan's text telling me he was in Raleigh with clients. She placed the title change consultation beside Diane's messages about getting him added to the deed later. Evan's attorney read each page without expression. Evan did not. He kept rubbing his thumb over the edge of his watch band. "You told Sophie your wife knew about the relationship?" Rachel asked. His attorney leaned forward. "We're not trying an adultery case here." "I agree. I'm evaluating explanations offered for expenditures and the reliability of statements about the marriage." Evan stared at the table. "I told Sophie what I thought was true." I finally spoke. "You thought I knew about her?" He looked at me. "You were never around." For a second, I could not tell whether I had heard him correctly. "I worked from home." "You were always working. And you were spending my money while telling another woman I had agreed to it." His attorney started to say my name, but I held up a hand. "No, I'm done." I looked at Evan. "You can call me cold. You can call me ambitious. You can say I worked too much. None of those things gave you permission to invent my consent." He looked away first. Rachel closed the stack. "We're not here to rewrite the marriage. We're here to identify assets, debts, and a workable separation agreement." After that, Evan became quieter. The beach house had been sold, but the net proceeds were still in Rachel's trust account. My records trace the purchase funds back to assets I had owned before the marriage, while Evan's attorney argued that some marital funds had gone toward carrying costs and improvements. Rachel did not pretend the answer was automatic. We have a strong tracing case, she had told me before the meeting. Strong isn't the same as automatic. We document every marital contribution, credit it where the law requires, and we don't overclaim. The Charlotte condo itself was documented as premarital property, with any provable marital contribution accounted for separately. Rights to work created before the marriage remained mine, while marital income, retirement contributions earned during the marriage, joint savings, and any provable marital investment in separate assets would be calculated from the records. I didn't ask for revenge numbers. I didn't demand he leave with the clothes on his back. I didn't try to seize every dollar he had ever touched. I wanted one thing: a clear line between his life and mine. The irony was that this frightened him more than any threat could have. For the first time, every part of our lifestyle was being assigned to the person who actually owned it, earned it, or was legally responsible for it. When everything was mixed together under the word marriage, Evan had felt wealthy. When everything was separated, he finally saw his own balance sheet. The mediator took us into separate rooms for the next round. That was where the negotiation stopped feeling like a marriage and started feeling like accounting. Rachel and I went through numbers while coffee cooled untouched beside me. We allowed credit for documented marital contributions to the beach property. We calculated joint savings. We separated retirement contributions by date. We identified the few furnishings that were actually worth arguing over and then decided they were not worth the legal fees. Every time the mediator returned with a new demand from Evan's side, the demand was smaller. First, he wanted half the beach house proceeds. Then a substantial percentage. Then reimbursement for marital contributions plus a larger share of joint savings. At one point, he wanted me to continue paying part of his parents' housing costs for 6 months because, according to him, they had relocated in reliance on my promise that the beach house was for their retirement. I almost agreed out of habit. Rachel saw it on my face. "Is that something you want to do?" she asked quietly, "or something you feel guilty refusing?" The question embarrassed me because I knew the answer immediately. Guilty refusing. Then don't negotiate against yourself. That sentence was worth every dollar I paid her. About 90 minutes into the meeting, he interrupted his attorney. "Wait." Everyone looked at him. He leaned forward. "So how much do I actually get?" The room went quiet. And suddenly I was back in the coffee shop, hearing Sophie's voice. "So what does he actually get?" They had looked at the same marriage from opposite sides and asked the same question. I had imagined this moment in 100 different ways. Sometimes, in my head, he cried. Sometimes he apologized. Sometimes he finally understood that he had lost someone who had loved him completely. Instead, he wanted a number. Rachel gave him a preliminary range based on the records and explained that the final amount would depend on verified balances and the settlement terms. Evan stared at her. "That's it." I spoke for the first time in several minutes. "How much did you think there would be?" "We were married for 3 years." "Yes." He looked at me as if I were missing something obvious. I said, "Evan, you are not leaving with nothing. You have a salary. You have a car. You have retirement contributions from your job. You'll receive whatever portion of the actual marital assets you're legally entitled to." He laughed without humor. "So this whole thing is just you proving I'd be nothing without you?" "No." I shook my head. "I never needed to prove that." "Then what is this?" "I'm just not financing the version of you everyone else believes in anymore." His face went still. We didn't sign the final agreement that day, but the framework was settled. When I stepped into the hallway, Evan came after me. "Claire." I stopped. For the first time since the beach house, he didn't sound angry. "What if I end it with Sophie completely?" I looked at him. "Why would that matter to me? You're really not giving me any chance?" "You still don't understand." "Then explain it." I thought about that. This stopped being about Sophie when I realized this is who you are when you think there won't be consequences. He swallowed. "People make mistakes." "Yes." "So that's it?" "It's not that she stays or goes. It's that I saw you clearly, and I don't want this anymore. The elevator arrived. He didn't follow me inside. For the first time, I felt the marriage ending not with an explosion, but with a door closing quietly. The month after mediation was almost disappointingly ordinary. There was no cinematic collapse. Life simply stopped cushioning Evan. He did not go bankrupt. He had to pay for his own rent, insurance, parking, groceries, phone, and the family emergencies that used to land on my desk. He still earned a decent salary, but for years most of it had functioned like spending money because I covered the expensive parts of our life. Without that cushion, his budget finally had to match his income. A few weeks later, our mutual friend Marcus called and told me Evan had been fired. I asked one question. Did I have anything to do with it? No. He'd already been on a performance plan. He kept missing client calls, leaving work to argue about the house, and finally blew up at his supervisor. Marcus had worked in the same sales division before moving to another company. It wasn't one bad day, Marcus said. People had been covering missed follow-ups for months. Lately, he started disappearing for hours to deal with lawyers or call Sophie. Okay, I said. That was all I needed to know. I had not called his employer, threatened his job, or engineered his fall. He had finally reached consequences I was not there to absorb. 2 days later, I received a text from Sophie. You were right about one thing. None of it was his. I did not reply. A second message arrived a minute later. I should have asked more questions before believing him. Then a third. For what it's worth, he lied to me too. I read them once and locked my phone. I did not need an apology from Sophie, and I had no interest in building a friendship out of being deceived by the same man. But I understood what she was finally seeing. Evan had sold her a life he did not own. He had spoken about the beach house, the Charlotte condo, and my credit account as if access meant ownership. The illusion held only as long as no one asked for documents. Once the paperwork came out, the romance apparently became less convincing. Later, I heard Sophie ended things after Evan finally admitted the beach house, the Charlotte condo, and the credit account had never belonged to him. I did not need to witness the breakup. The separation and property settlement agreement was signed about 2 months after mediation. The legal divorce itself would take longer under North Carolina's separation requirement, but financially the marriage was over. The beach house proceeds were released according to the agreement after the lawyers accounted for the traced separate funds and the limited marital contributions. Evan kept his car and his own accounts. We divided the actual marital assets. I kept what the record showed was mine. Before he signed, Evan looked at me. Do you think you'll ever regret this? No. You're that sure? I'm not doing this because I'm angry anymore. He stared at the agreement for a moment, then signed. I left the office and went back to work. 6 months later, my new novel came out. It was not a copy of my marriage, but I kept one idea. A woman can spend years making another person's life easier without noticing how much of herself she has given away. Readers kept quoting one line from the ending. I didn't ruin your life. I just stopped paying for it. Months after publication, a text arrived from a number I did not recognize. Can we talk? Then another. I know what I lost now. I deleted both messages, turned my phone face down, and went back to my work. For the first time in years, my life belonged entirely to me.